Om Tare Du Tare Du Re Soha. Om Tare Du Tare Du Re Soha. Om Tare Du Tare Du Re Soha. Om Tare Du Tare Du.
Okay, so here we are once again with the opportunity to learn more about the 6 primary afflictions. Attachment, first one, was clearly the most significant one, then followed by anger, huge destroyer of a lot of relationships and self-worth and value and, well, just our environment and communities. And now we're on to the third one, which is titled here as Arrogance. Sometimes you'll see it as pride. And so I think we'll have an interesting discussion around this view on arrogance as presented from a Buddhist perspective. So we'll unpack it a little bit. We'll read from the text. We'll get into some of the details. But then, how's this really apply to us? We'll have a rich discussion there, I do believe. So let's get right to that. Right off the bat, arrogance is a mental factor. And that's really an understanding from Buddhist perspective. It's been, a few thousand years here, almost 3,000, of really looking at the mind, looking at mental factors, being very precise in their clarity around defining and understanding mental factors and how they show up and so forth. So they're not saying it's an attitude. They're not saying it's an emotion. It's a mental factor that, based on the view of a personal identity that misapprehends how the I or mine exists. So that's baseline to all afflictions, right? We misapprehend how the I or mine exists, me and mine. But then strongly grasp to an inflated image of ourselves. So not only are we misunderstanding, now we grasp to ourselves in a way, in this inflated way. It functions to prevent us from learning and increasing our virtue and causes us to disrespect or denigrate others. Vasubandhu mentions 7 types of arrogance. So again, getting right down to these definitions and clearly identifying things. Number 1 is arrogance, thinking I am superior in relation to someone who is inferior. In this and the next 2 forms of arrogance, we compare ourselves with others in terms of wealth, looks, knowledge, social standing, athletic ability, fame, and other factors. Right? I'm superior, they're inferior. Arrogance, thinking I am superior in relation to someone who is our equal. Arrogance, thinking I am superior in relation to someone who is better than us. Again, in these qualities. Arrogance that regards our aggregates and thinks I. This is also called conceit of I am. Based on self-grasping, we believe ourselves to be inherently existent and very important. So really, in this sense of arrogance, it's just the way we often see ourselves as, oh yeah, I'm independently John. And, quite a bit of arrogance there to not even recognize that there's nothing about me that I created. Everything about me has been independence upon others and many other factors. The arrogance that thinks we have good qualities when we don't, that we have good qualities that we don't have. Arrogance thinking that we are just a little bit inferior to someone who is really wonderful. We may think, in this group of esteemed people, I am the least qualified, implying that although we are less than those who are experts, we are definitely better than the majority of other people. It also claims status by being associated with someone who is better than us. I am a disciple of a truly great spiritual master. So there's an arrogance there with just who's our teacher and who we get to be with. And this could be social groups, etc. And then arrogance, thinking our faults are virtues. For example, an ethically degenerate person thinks they are upstanding and righteous. And so these are these 7 types. As far as Vasubandhu, I'm going to go ahead through Nagarjuna's, which has a little different flavor, and then we can sit here and look at how it might be helpful to us. In the Precious Garland, Nagarjuna delineates 7 types of arrogance in a slightly different way, although the meaning is generally the same as above. The one exception is the arrogance of inferiority. Here, Nagarjuna describes it as the arrogance of disparaging ourselves and thinking that we're useless and incapable. Pali Canon agrees with Nagarjuna's gloss. So, number 1, concerning these, the first is called arrogance. It is where one thinks of oneself as even inferior to the inferior, equal to the equal, or greater than or equal to the inferior. One thinks oneself as even inferior to the inferior, equal to the equal, or greater than or equal to the inferior. So if we look at that, right, less than, equal to, greater than, you're going to see a common thread here. It's always in comparison. It's always in comparison. It's always me, self-grasping, my qualities in comparison with others. It is presumptive arrogance for one to presume that one is equal to someone who is better. If one presumes oneself to be even better than one's betters, then arrogance. This is arrogance beyond arrogance, thinking oneself to be even loftier than the lofty. It is excessively bad, like developing sores on top of one's boils. Boils are bad, sores on top, even worse. The 5 empty aggregates are called the aggregates subject to clinging. When one apprehends them as I, this is called the conceit of thinking I am. So back to that same one that we said in the last one, just the arrogance of thinking we are independently self-existent. 5, to presume that one has attained a result that one has not attained is to have conceited arrogance. 6, the wise know that boasting about one's negative deeds is erroneous arrogance. And 7, deriding oneself, thinking I cannot manage, is the arrogance of inferiority. Such are the 7 forms of arrogance in brief. So as you can see, they really get pretty precise, scientific, certain views about arrogance and its relationship even to our insecurity, our inferiority as well. Always in comparison, but always coming from a place of a sense of self and arrogance even about how I exist. And the downside of this is arrogance blocks us from gaining new qualities. When we believe we are already top-notch, we are not receptive to learning. Instead, we remain complacent or even smug without endeavoring to cultivate virtuous qualities. Arrogance due to our Dharma knowledge or accomplishments does not plague beginners. At that time, we are aware of how little we know and how much we need to learn and practice. But after we have studied and practice for a while, arrogance can easily set in and arrest our spiritual growth. It's important to discriminate between arrogance and self-confidence. Arrogance is often a cover for insecurity, whereas self-confidence acknowledges our abilities without inflating them. Self-confident people have no need to boast of their achievements. Self-confidence, an essential factor on the spiritual path, should be nurtured. Having the thought, as I progressively practice the path, I'll be able to accomplish all of these bodhisattva activities. It is a helpful and necessary attitude. It is not arrogance. Aware of our potential boosts our enthusiasm to engage in Dharma study and practice. Similarly, rejoicing rejoicing at our virtue with a sense of satisfaction, thinking, I feel good because I kept my precepts in a challenging situation, is not arrogance. It is a way of reinforcing virtue. So, a lot of nitty-gritty there. But one of the key points that they make that I think we all can recognize is, when people, pride and arrogance often is the result of insecurity. It's out of insecurity that I am comparing myself to others. It's out of insecurity that I measure myself against others, when they come into a room. And it's out of insecurity I start, putting my social standing and self-worth with, this group or that group, or, even in my own environments here, and we gauge a room, how do I feel in terms of my relationship with these people? And distinguishing between that sense of insecurity and then that sort of arrogance that they're using the word here instead of pride, but pride gets used often in this relationship as well. Self-confidence, self-worth is not insecure, right? It's the opposite of insecure. So having a good, healthy sense of self and well-being, then I'm not comparing myself. There's no need to compare my worth with another. There's still value, though, in recognizing that everyone that I meet can teach me something. Everyone I meet is better at many things than I am. And there's no need to diminish my value because I'm around highly qualified people that are very skilled in specific ways. I can learn from them. So there's a really tricky business here, because in order to even get to that place, well, we need some self-worth. And then some of the ways to build up our self-worth is to talk to people and to recognize our worth. And there's this, how do I evaluate, my progress and my value? So there's, a tendency to kind of sometimes think, wow, this person really has their stuff together, and, I don't. And I think all of us can relate to a very clear struggle that plagues most of humanity, is that we compare how we feel with how others appear on their outside, right? We compare our insides with their outsides. So everybody else looks like they got their stuff together, but, I have feelings, and I'm not like that. They look like they got together. Meanwhile, they're looking at us thinking, wow, you really got your stuff together. And I'm not like that. And this goes on all day long. And so being able to be open about just who we are and how we feel, we get to communicate and recognize that many people struggle with that same issue. I was in a group today, and this group is designed, it's pretty interesting, where they've got this whole list of sort of good qualities, attributes, and sort of defects, things to work on, negative qualities. And so everybody in the room gets a sheet, and then this one person's, the person that gets to do this is looking for some feedback about how others see them. And so everybody rates one to, like picks 3 attributes and three areas to improve, 3 negative sort of qualities. And then they just go through the list, and how many people think they're helpful and kind, how many people think they're resentful, and arrogant is actually one of them, and what are these qualities. And they go around, then they actually have that person give the direct feedback. I think you're arrogant because, right? I think you're helpful because. And so they get, pretty straightforward feedback. There's no rescuing, no saving, not, I see you're arrogant, but, you can't do that. You're arrogant. This is why, this is my experience. So it takes a lot of self-worth to sit there and listen to this, right? And they do all the good stuff first, but, by the time they get to the other stuff, you're not hearing the good stuff anymore. You're just kind of hearing this. And then you, who have rated yourself, you go up and you circle what you thought, right? And sometimes you'll find that, yeah, I kind of identified helpful and they said I'm helpful, but I identified this and nobody did that, and I have these other qualities. And so sometimes we see, whoa, I had some different views than others do, and sometimes I'm fairly accurate. And the point of the exercise is to, and then, at the end, actually, then you share 3 secrets that you've never shared with anyone. So at the end, you kind of share your views, that how you perceive yourself, and then you give up 3 secrets. And so after each secret of something that they did, the facilitator says, has anyone else ever done anything, for example, that puts someone in danger for your own selfish reason? And the whole room raises their hands, right? And then they do another secret, and then he puts it out to, reframes it to the room. Everybody holds up their hand. Basically what they're finding out is all these secrets are things that others can relate to and have done similar things. Which is really powerful, because, I've been hiding this because I don't want anyone to know. And then everybody else in the room can relate to it, has done very similar things. And, there's this sense of, we're all working on ourselves, right? We're all trying to find a way to be okay. And so this authenticity, this communication, this openness to be vulnerable, this openness to hear another, this openness to open yourself up to your own views of yourself, not just theirs. And then that person spends the next 24 hours in silence just to reflect on the feedback. Okay, there's no, and so really, I think powerful exercise that they do. But it takes a really nurturing environment, right? A real nurturing, safe environment to do this. They do this every Wednesday. And so something like that is, allowing this kind of recognition that we are all, struggling in our own ways. So from a Buddhist perspective, we're all in samsara. We all have afflictions. And so nobody's better than anybody. Some people have had some more skill in certain areas than others. But my insecurity, which leads to arrogance or pride, is never going to let me be authentic and share, to compare in such an open way. Whereas this openness could do that, in which case I may gain some self-worth, some confidence, some understanding, that, I'm not perfect. There's some stuff to work on. I do have these good qualities that, others recognize. And then I know what I get to work on. I know and understand what what is supporting me and where I'm struggling. And so here then we have this, very few people get such an opportunity, right? We're just mostly going through our day, and we don't get, a structured setting like that. So the opportunity here is to already come to a place, if we can, in one way that I think is helpful, is to recognize that your Buddha nature is no less than anybody else's. Okay. You have no less Buddha nature than the Dalai Lama. You have no less Buddha nature than, any of these great beings. You have the same amount. The only difference is that they know it and we don't. So there's obscurations, right? And the idea is, as we remove these, we're already there. And so the work becomes removing these obscurations, right? These afflictions and these things. And in that way, we're all the same in that sense, as far as value, right? We all have the same Buddha nature. Nobody's better than me. Nobody's less than me. I don't need to compare myself to anybody. But I need to be able to learn from others. So another way of putting what was reframed, that was said there, is the biggest obstacle to learning is the presumption of knowledge. That's the way I like to reframe that. If we think we're top notch, I think is what it said there, it's hard to learn from others. But so when I think I know this, when I think I'm the skilled one, it's hard for me to learn from anybody. So how do we, at one level, recognize our value, understand we have, our core Buddha nature, and so is everybody else, and that we're all kind of in this prison of samsara, and we all have different work to do. But at the core, I'm not better than or less than. However, others can teach me a lot of things, and I need to be able to gauge my progress, to know what I need to work on. Because we don't have a Buddhist room where we go sit there and have all the other Sangha members or High Lamas tell you, okay, I think you're this or that, So we need to be able to, have a good sense of communication, of authenticity, and openness in our relationships, in our interactions, and a capacity to set aside what we think we know, and be open to learning from people, even we, sometimes think they don't have much to offer. Maybe they do. Well, we might discover they really didn't. But we don't know that till we check it out. So the other saying they have in the recovery programs is, not to have contempt prior to investigation, right? Stick a label on it and I can't learn. So really a lot to work with here in arrogance. It's not just I'm better than somebody or less than somebody. It's really how does this obscure my capacity? And I think of arrogance as always coming from a state of some form of insecurity, really. And otherwise, when I'm secure, I don't need to measure in that sense of superiority. But I still need to measure, how I can learn and what somebody knows that might be helpful. So some subtle work there. So I'm going to pause right there, see if anyone has any thoughts or comments in regard to that. Gives me a chance to drink some water.
Hey, John.
Oh, Chris.
Hey, buddy. Hey, just a quick question about, a lot of times we think of arrogance as, of course, feeling superior to someone, but there seemed to be, and I hadn't read the text prior to now, but it was also feeling more inferior, or more inferior than inferior, and things like that, right? Like it's sort of like putting yourself down, and it seemed like, and I know sometimes we can get. Putting ourselves down can lead to sort of so much self-reflection and so much self inward, just that inward spiral, right? And that leads, that's like a reverse arrogance that manifests itself. I don't know, maybe I'm saying it right, but did I hear that right, that there was also
Yeah,
like an inferior arrogance?
you're right. And so, the big thing to remember when we get these texts translated to English, a lot of times there's not a great English word. Often this is actually used pride, sometimes arrogance, so forth. But when we think about insecurity, when we think about inferiority, it's still very self-centered, right? I'm still very important. And there's an obsession around, feeling less than. What's the classic saying? I'm not much, but I'm all I think about. And so in that sense, is, again, the basis of what they're calling arrogance in English is a real self-identification as independent and self-existent. And that can lead to feelings of inferiority or superiority. And but there's always this sense of I, and always in comparison to, as is how I get either that superior or inferior. And that's how this tricky relationship works.
Yeah, and self-identification, that was like in the first sentence, right? Something about self-identification. So
Yeah.
yeah. Thanks.
You're welcome. Well, we got at least another 15 minutes. You want to talk about baseball or? Well, my suggestion here is, from my side, I really noticed, these when judgments arise, and judgmental mind, right? Judgment's another tricky word. We want good judgment, but we don't want a judgmental mind. But I kind of want a judgmental mind so I can have good judgment. But often we talk about judgmental mind is in terms of, judging the value of another. And when I notice like my own judgments pop up, that's another way of looking at arrogance. It's not just I'm better than, I'm less than. I'm evaluating the worth and value of another being or another teaching. And, we can have it. It was pointed out here in our own spiritual growth, and who our teachers are, what our path is compared to somebody else's path. There's going to be some judgment, some pride that arises, and often disparaging, the paths that other people are on, or what they're associated with, and we might be evaluating, their level of practice and so forth. So a lot of comparison can happen, even in our own groups, or we hear about other people. And today in the group, my group actually, not the one I was talking about, where I was just observing, they have these questions, what do you recommend, for this or that? And, I'm not here to recommend those things, I'm here for people to explore their path and find the things that resonate, and things that might be authentic to them. And, it's not like, wow, we've got the right one. We hopefully have the right one for us. And so how do we notice in our minds when we start judging, other people's spiritual path, other people's sort of belief systems, or even within, our own sort of systems, evaluating people, and at the same time have the capacity to discern what would be a quality path for us, and what path not to engage in, and have some confidence around that.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
All right. So this arrogance idea, I think there's something lost in translation, because when I think of arrogance, I think of that I'm superior and someone's inferior, and trying to explore it from a separation of me in relation to another and judgments around that. So I think, like, would that be similar to someone who is really caught up in being a victim and saying that there's something inherently wrong, the world's out to get me, that for some reason that the superior, you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think so, based on what's being shared here, because we can get even prideful in our victimhood, right? And very attached to that, but you don't understand, I'm like this. And so it could be very detrimental in that way, in that sort of grasping. And there can also be the arrogance of not honoring that you've been a victim, right? And that insecurity about sharing that. So it can cut either way, but there, a lot of times people are very heavily identified with what they view in a way that's inferior. Being a victim would be one of those. But it's all really around self-importance instead of self-value, and those are tricky differences sometimes. Yeah. Rita.
Thanks, John. This is such a relevant issue for me. You invited comments and not just questions, and I'd like to report that I recognized my own arrogance in an encounter today. There was a young man at a stand in front of the grocery store selling a book, and he was saying, it's not about politics. And I'm like, well, what are your politics? And I engaged him, and it was a big step for me to engage a stranger and try to listen and try not to judge. And I did the best I could. And I found myself feeling judgments arise and feeling triggered and starting to feel emotions. And I did the best I could, and I wished him luck, and I left. And I'm not proud of even my best, but I'm, it's an interesting balancing act for me to acknowledge that I tried, I stuck my neck out and tried to have the conversations that I'm being encouraged to have. And I did the best I could, and I walked away. And so it's just a comment about observing my own arrogance and judgments arising and knowing he's wrong, but refraining from telling him how wrong he is. And not entirely refraining from being a little bit snarky, just a little bit. And so anyway, That's my report on working with arrogance. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I mean, I think a lot of people can relate to that, right? And the other piece that is so important is to recognize how value, like you're saying, you're not proud of it, but well, you did a great job to engage, to observe, to work with it. And like that's really advanced stuff. Most humans aren't even observing the judgments. They're just, I'm gonna, engage with them, show them they're wrong. And so to even be at the level of observation and to work with that, I think that's a wonderful practice. It's something to feel pretty good about.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
I don't see everyone, so if you're raising a hand, just just unmute. Go ahead. I only see a few of you when I'm in this screen. Okay, well,
So is it wrong to have to be prideful?
the word wrong is pretty loaded. How about we would say, from the way that we're using the word prideful, we would see it has a lot of limitations, a lot of restrictive elements, a lot of detriment. So being prideful is compared to having a lot of self-worth. And so there was the point in the reading that says it's valuable to feel good about your progress. It's valuable to acknowledge, just as I was just pointing out with Rita, for example, how we worked with virtue and how we stuck to, our values or anything in a difficult situation. And so in the text, they were making the point that it's really important to have that sense of value, that sense of feeling good about who you are. So in the West, we might use the word prideful, right? And matter of fact, I think Rita said, I'm not proud of. And so we have this context of the word. That's why sometimes translations are tricky. Prideful in the sense of I'm better than someone, not so helpful. Really proud that you're able to stick to something, work through something, and come out, in a way that you feel good about. That's totally okay and helpful. Because you're acknowledging, not in comparison to others, but you're acknowledging your own effort, right? And that's important to be prideful of, right? Our own effort, our growth, our progress, our inspiration. So, we always have these loaded words that don't always translate that well. And because there's an exact word. That's why I think they picked arrogance instead of pride. Because we have, I'm proud of my second grader, I'm proud of, and your honor roll kid's better than some other kid, it's kind of harsh, man. That's a technical term, harsh, man. So, words are tricky business, but the essence is around comparing myself with others and my value and their value versus being prideful of, I've stuck with meditating for, 30 days straight. Like that feels good. And, but I don't need to go tell everybody about it. Right. And have a sense of, value around that, of pride around that. Could be very helpful. But sometimes you'll see the 6 and pride will be one of them, but pride in the context of that comparison. I did see the guy at the airport with the world's greatest dad shirt on. And I wish I had that guy for my dad. Missed out. I was that close. He was right there.
Then you wouldn't be here, though. We'd all miss out.
World's greatest dad, big old shirt. Man.
Yeah, I guess I'm having a little bit of issue with this because like I think like if I see someone who's a little bit superior to me, I can still have self-worth, but that can be like inspirational. Like I want to get to that place.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also the place of like, you know, I appreciate somebody. I think, yeah, I mean, I think maybe it's lost in translation, but I appreciate, you know, we're all inspired by someone who beat the odds and is a motivational speaker. And it's like saying, hey, look at me, I overcame this. As long as it's not like putting someone down in the process, but like, you know, whether it's, you know, getting in shape, whether it's a spiritual practice, I want to have someone who says, you know, you know, the feeling is they are better than me, but I can get to that place.
Yeah, and that's not in conflict with what they're saying. That's exactly what they're saying. As a matter of fact, they even use the word better, you know, in there sometimes. More skillful in these particular attributes, right? And, you know, if we don't find people who have gone down the path a little further than us, have developed certain qualities, well, you know, we wouldn't have very many teachers and we wouldn't be able to learn much. And so being inspired by whether it's a motivational speaker or, you know, that really kind-hearted human being that, you know, works 3 jobs, raises the kids by themselves, not flashy, not on stage, but is like this really amazing human being. We can be inspired by that, right? And so yeah, we do that. That was the point I'm saying is we still need to recognize others and their qualities and values that we admire and would like to learn from, be inspired by, you know, cultivate those qualities within us. In which case it's not, you know, detrimental. That we need that. The big struggle part here is the I in comparison, in the sense of better than, less than, instead of this person's more skillful in these areas. And so I'm inspired to do those things.
It feels like a really delicate balancing act to be, you know, and maybe that plays into equanimity to, you know, to feel like, well, I'm okay, you're okay, you know, I'm okay. I'm Buddha nature. And I can be more of this or more of that, just like John is, or Connie is, or, you know, I can see things to aspire to and also feel whole and complete. That is a challenge for me.
Right. And that's the goal, which is why it's a challenge. It's not like we're there. I mean, we all want to be like Connie, but, you know, come on, there's a lot of work to do. And that's just being realistic. So, but that's the space to work towards, is that, you know, even the homicidal maniac has Buddha nature, but I don't particularly want to be like him. Okay. There's a lot of affliction there. And, you know, these other people who've walked through things like, you know, Chris was talking about, who are inspirations of light, of overcoming And, I'm thinking of Helen Keller at the moment, and, wow, Helen Keller just, inspires the heck out of me. And, that's these qualities, I know I don't have yet, but it doesn't make me less than her. It makes me less skillful in those qualities that she has. And so it's like that, though. It's that, we all have Buddha nature. We all are in prison. We're all in the same prison. The way Jetsuma Tenzin Palmo describes the prison in a dream that she had is like, there's the penthouse with really nice luxury rooms, and, going down to the middle rooms, down to the dungeon. Some people have pretty miserable lives, but it's still all prison. And sometimes we get a better floor, sometimes not such a good room. And so, with that kind of way of understanding samsara, that everybody's got their conditioning, I just certainly have some of these which are kind of better, and some of these that aren't so helpful. And that there are others who have really developed the types of things that would be helpful to me. And, they inspire me to work hard and move on, like, me and His Holiness Dalai Lama, my teacher, Geshe Gelsen, and so forth, to really know, wow, they are far superior in, these qualities than I currently am. And, but I know I can do it because they have done it. What I cannot be is a 7'2" basketball player in this lifetime. Not that I want to be a 7'2". I mean, I like to be like a Johnny Stockton guy, like 6'1", and, move that ball around. What a great point guard. That was back in my basketball days.
I bet the Dalai Lama can't fix a car the way you can.
Good point. And I can't fix a watch the way he could. Anyway, clocks. He was into clocks, right? Yeah. So, yeah. So it's, it's like that. It's not that we don't discern that people have these good qualities and so forth, or qualities that are not so good for us, but rather that we're all kind of here, and no one's better than or less than. We're just all in a prison, and let's recognize that we support each other. And some people are good teachers of what not to do, and some people are good inspirational teachers of what to do. And they show us our mind where we need to grow.
Hey, John, one last question.
Mhm.
Like I don't know about folks on the call, but I think I probably vacillate somewhere between superior to inferior. I mean, and any hour of any day, I'm just probably up and down, right? And looking for some equanimity, right? I don't know. Do you have any advice on like practices, like a daily practice? I know maybe you've talked about this, and I did print out my Dharma Center daily practice book. I appreciate you guys putting that online. It talks about an evening practice and kind of like looking at your virtuous activity and non-virtuous activity. So I'm trying to incorporate that. But yeah, any advice on how to find some equanimity in the spectrum?
Yeah, and essentially it's this daily practice is where we'll get to notice what you just pointed out, which is sometimes I feel like I'm up here, sometimes I feel like down here. But if we start observing that daily, what we're going to recognize is really none of those. Those are temporary emotions that are relative to the situation I'm in, but also the state of mind I'm in, right? Sometimes when I really feel kind of good, I'm not measuring myself against anybody in any room. And sometimes when I'm a little sick or not feeling so well or feeling overwhelmed, I'm comparing myself all day. And so even recognizing my state of mind has a reference to this relativity. And so what happens is, as we talk about these things, what we want to do is bring them to mind. And so, for example, a simple thing which I'd recommend this week is to notice our judgments about ourselves and just notice them, and have that be an actual intention every day for the next week. And then you might notice how transient those judgments are, or how strong they are, and start working with, well, are they true? Are they true? And the bottom line for all this, to really get realization, is to discover they're not. And but that only gets discovered by experience, directly experience the sensations, the feelings, the judgments, and bringing perspective. And over time, those afflictions diminish. Because once we realize something's not true, then it just doesn't compute so much. That takes a long period of time, but immediately we can start working on catching our judgments and asking, what can I learn? One of the good practice that's helpful, I think, is to see that everyone I meet is better at something than I am, right? And a lot of you have better hair than I do, apparently. And I just say that because when you give this teaching, to see that everyone is better at something, you have qualities you don't have. And somebody asked the Dalai Lama, isn't it difficult for you sometimes to be with someone and think that they have better qualities than you? And he just laughed and he said, sometimes I do think, wow, they have good hair.
He said that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. When you're having a hard time finding a good quality about a particular, because sometimes, it's just really hard to find a good quality about somebody, right? You're digging. You're digging. So, but so that's something that helps me. And and it's nice, I want to know that everyone I'm speaking to is valuable and, have something to offer. And I'm not great at it, but I'm much better at it than I used to be. And, but the other thing, yes, is I watch my old, when we have a discussion like this, I can look back in time and think about my own arrogance around my spiritual path, or what I've learned, or what those other lineages do. And, used to have all these judgments about that. And, these days I just see how ridiculous I was, and how little I knew, and still know, right? But I do know enough to know that there's many paths for many people. And I don't know which one's right for anyone. So that's helpful. Yeah, being curious, being teachable. But do it consistently. All right, well, that might be a good spot to buy. I do want to just come back to the text for a moment, though, actually. So hang on a sec. Kind of, they're describing, they gave all those technical things. Oh, I didn't share it with you. I just shared it with me. Sorry about that. Share screen. And then basically, then they really define it. I think they define it better, not in the list, but right here. It's important to discriminate between arrogance and self-confidence. Arrogance often a cover for insecurity, whereas self-confidence acknowledges our abilities without inflating them. So, there's a really good clarity, okay? Self-confident people have no need to boast of their achievements. Self-confidence an essential factor on the spiritual path, should be nurtured, right? Our self-worth, our confidence should be nurtured. Having the thought, as I progressively practice the path, I'll be able to accomplish all these bodhisattva activities. Well, that's a lot of confidence, a lot of value. You know, it's helpful and necessary attitude. It's not arrogance. It also points out that we're only going to have that, going back to Chris's point, you know, when I hear a teacher or an inspirational speaker, I feel like I might be able to do something like that. You know, this is important. It needs to be nurtured. They did it. Maybe I can do it. So, you know, it's really in this, I find that the distinction's helpful. Awareness of our potential boosts our enthusiasm to engage in Dharma study and practice. Similarly, rejoicing in our virtue with a sense of satisfaction, thinking, I feel good because I kept my precepts in challenging situations. It's not arrogance. So, right, that would be the prideful question. I feel good about that. I feel prideful. I feel like, yeah, you know, I gave that my best. So rather than the list and those little things, maybe it's more helpful to see what our motivation is, you know, and see what is it cultivating a sense of self-worth or insecurity? Comparison with others is always going to be this sort of insecurity in terms of value. Instead of comparing myself with others and like, wow, they have some attributes I would like to have, and I would like to grow those. And maybe they, you know, they're an inspiration for that. So rather than get stuck on the labels, you know, we go to our motivations and the outcomes. Is it adding to insecurity or is it adding to self-worth? And how can I learn from someone I think I'm better than them? It's a pretty hard thing. Yeah. And then here's another trick, and then we'll wrap. There's a Buddhist practice of seeing everyone in pure view, that everyone is a Buddha showing you your mind. And so whether it's the guy hawking books, he's here to show you some stuff. Yeah, let's go look at my mind. And in that way, you know, we can be open to the idea that Buddhas can show up in any form, in any situation. The server at the restaurant, the dishwasher, whatever. The guy selling books or preaching on the corner about saving your soul, and they're there to show you your mind. And in that way, you know, I can learn from everybody. I had that practice for a long time. It's good practice. Technically true. All right, let's go ahead now and dedicate this merit that we have cultivated here today with each other and supporting each other in this journey. I'll pop up the dedication, and just knowing that there's a lot of things we could have been doing on a Wednesday evening. Today we have chosen to support each other and to learn and to extract methods and teachings and wisdoms that we can try applying to our lives and see if they're valuable to us. See if they eliminate suffering, cultivate well-being, and to see if it is a proper path for us. In the process, a great deal of merit has arisen. So I invite you, if you'd care to dedicate this merit for the benefit of all sentient beings and for our own continued spiritual growth. And let's begin. By this merit, may I soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that I may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings, May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare